had a bone manipulation quirk with one for all. Changes occur in his life when he finally awakens his own quirk.
Bone manipulation occur in his life when he finally awakens his own quirk. Bone manipulation quirk with one for all. Changes occur in his life when he finally awakens his own quirk. Before we start, thank you for the support in the last video. This really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to leave a like in this video, and you can suggest a My Hero Academia fanfiction with a link in the comments if you want me to read it, and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Chapter 4: Fated Rivalry. UAPE grounds. Quite the first impression Izuku thought as he watched his fellow classmates panic. "This is our first day here," Ochako shouted in shock. Izuku examined the pro-hero's face, looking for any signs of deceit or any signs of hesitation at all. Sadly, there was nothing to show Izuku that this was just a ruse to get the students to work harder. Though messed up, it could be a way to weed out the weak and encourage the students to take the hero course very seriously. Either that or he has a really good resting bitch face and he's just good at acting. Either way, Izuku needed to do his best here. Aizawa wasn't fazed by the panic from his students. Natural disasters, massive accidents, ego-made villains. All kinds of calamities can happen when we least expect it. And it's our job as heroes to face it, in order to restore peace, he said as he turned to the class, who shrank under his gaze. If you came here to just have fun, then that's too bad. For the next 3 years, all you can expect from your life at UA is one of the hardship. Well, that confirms it. Unless we step up, we're all going to have a bad time. Izuku glanced around to see everyone looking more or less terrified of being kicked out despite the work they put into getting in. "This is plus ultra. I expect you to overcome these trials and climb to the top." That seemed to do the trick as everyone, including Izuku, was getting pumped and becoming more serious. "Now it's time to step up," the pro said. With that, the trials began, the first being the 50-meter dash, and Izuku was paired off with Bakugo. Both eager to what they can do. As soon as the signal was given, Bakugo blasted off with his quirk, covering Izuku in a cloud of dust. Blast rush. The Bond teen screamed as he created mini explosions from his palms, allowing him to dash through the air. The students watched in awe. "Look at him go. So fast." Bakugo grinned as he flew by, clearly enjoying the comments from his classmates. Only for it to be short-lived when he blinked. With wide eyes he saw Izuku calmly crossing the finish line. Izuku Midoriya, 3 seconds, Katsuki Bakugo, 4.13 seconds. Once the machine announced the results, the students were confused, only to go wide-eyed when they saw Izuku at the end of the finish line. What? How did he get there? Wasn't he at the starting line? The class started talking amongst themselves as they tried to process what just happened. Their conversations were interrupted as Bakugo started walking towards Izuku. Bakugo clicked his teeth as he approached Izuku. "Figures your weird fucking quirk could do that," he said as he watched Izuku stand up, though noticeably a bit sweaty. Izuku just shrugged with a smile as they both made their way to their classmates, who were still trying to process how exactly did Izuku finish the test. Upon arriving, the class immediately bombarded Izuku with questions. The teen blushed from all the attention. "I just used my quirk is all," Izuku said casually, which made the class all the more confused. Ida, Ochako and Bakugo were the only ones used to the weirdness. But that didn't mean they had questions of their own. "Is it speed or something else?" the class thought in unison. The class eventually let it slide as they continued the 50-meter dash. Izuku used this opportunity to study everyone's quirks and what they can do. As predicted, not everyone can use their quirks for mobility, giving an advantage to others who could. Unbeknownst to Izuku, Aizawa spent that time analyzing his quirk as well. It was a distraction. The moment smoke covered him, he used his quirk. While everyone was watching Bakugo, he was already at the end of the finish line by the time the smoke cleared. He then glanced at Izuku, who was studying his classmate's quirk. "This kid is something else." he thought as a grin slowly formed on his face. He then signaled the next test to begin. The next trial was the grip test. Izuku was paired off with a teen named Mizo Shoji. He was a tall teen with white hair and a mask over his face. He also had a transformation quirk that gave him extra limbs. As both grabbed the device, Izuku channeled one for all as he applied pressure to the device. Careful not to destroy the device or his hand in the process. It wasn't long until the two got their results. Izuku Midoriya, 700.0 kilograms. Mizo Shoji, 540.0 kilograms. Damn. You two are seriously strong, a teen with black hair said as he looked at the two's results. Are you both gorillas or something? He then pointed at Shoji. Well, you're more of an octopus, he added. Octopuses are sexy. A short teen with purple hair said as he stared at Shoji. He then made a perverted face that made the three shiver. While this was going on, the other classmates were shocked at the strength Izuku possessed. They all had similar impressions of the teen. Mainly seeing him as a plain-looking guy who doesn't have much going on for him. Two teens in particular were watching him in interest. One was a mature-looking teen with a ponytail wearing an analytical expression. The other was a teen with short red and white hair wearing a stoic, but calculative expression. Both had their own reasons for studying his quirk. The physical examination proceeded rather smoothly. Eventually the softball pitch trial came up, and the first one was Ochako. She threw the ball in the air, looking like it would never return. Aizawa eventually revealed her score to be an infinity. The whole class said in shock, making Ochako blush a bit. Finally it was Izuku's turn. As he stepped into the circle, his friends couldn't help but have their own discussion. I wonder how Midoriya is going to handle this, Ida said while rubbing his chin with a calculative expression. Maybe he'll create a cannon and make it go flying. Ochako said excitedly as she pumped her fists. Fat chance, the nerd's probably just going to chuck it with his telekinesis, or some shit, Bakugo said with an eye roll, barely hiding his intrigue. Cannon, telekinesis, was the collective thought of the other students. The other two in particular were just as surprised, thinking that Izuku simply had a strength enhancement quirk. Aizawa handed the softball to Izuku, who stared at it in thought. If he used his blasters, there's a good chance that he might end up destroying the ball. If he simply threw it with his quirk, then it wouldn't really be showing plus ultra. I can't go overboard, and I can't be lazy about it. With that thought he suddenly had an idea that made him grin, making his classmates confused. Izuku's grin widened as he covered the ball with a green glow, surprising his classmates, except for his friends and Aizawa, who saw this during the examination. He then threw the ball straight in the air, confusing everyone. While the ball was in the air, he created a bone club, shocking everyone once again, and made the teen with the ponytail feel faint. What else can he do? Was everyone's collective thought. Izuku then held the club with both hands and got into a batting position. When the ball got into range, he screamed, "Batter up!" In one fluid motion like a professional baseball player, he swung with all his might, creating a strong gust of wind that staggered his classmates. The ball was sent soaring through the sky, and after what seemed like a long time, the device in Aizawa's hand beeped, signaling that the ball finally landed. Izuku Midoriya, 900.0 meters. Izuku grinned and held a peace sign towards his friends, who cheered. Well, except Bakugo, who looked away, but Izuku could see a small smirk. Not everyone else, whose jaws were still on the floor. He made his way towards his friends, where he was greeted by an ecstatic Ochako, an analytical Ida, and Bakugo, who was pretending to be unimpressed. After picking their jaws off the floor, the class eventually gathered around Aizawa as he revealed the results. In first place was Yaoyorozu Momo, and second went to him. Third went to Todoroki Shoto. Izuku was more than happy that he at least made it to the top 5. However, he was still sympathetic towards the perverted short teen named Minoru Mineta, who was at the bottom of the list. Said boy fell to his knees and started to cry anime tears. "No. I'm about to be expelled," he said. His other classmates were starting to feel sympathetic as well, knowing that this was supposed to be where your path to be a hero starts. Izuku was about to speak up when the short teen spoke again. "And there's so many hot girls here too. Life isn't fair," he said aloud. And just like that, all the sympathy built up disappeared. Izuku put his hand down and tried not to bonk Mineta on the head with a bone club. Aizawa then revealed that the threat of expulsion was a lie, and that it was simply a way for him to get the best out his students. But at the end of the explanation, he gave a warning to Mineta about the consequences of sexual harassment. Said teen felt great fear at the thought of crossing the line and fearfully nodded. Understandably, the class was rather miffed at being tricked, except for Yaoyorozu, who explained that there wasn't any real threat of expulsion in the first place. With that, the class started making their way back to their classrooms. As they made their way back, Izuku glanced behind him with a grin and gave a thumbs up, before looking ahead and joining the rest of the class. In the direction where Izuku gave a thumbs up, All Might watched the whole thing with a big grin on his face. "Great work, my boy," the pro thought as he made his way back in the building. The rest of the day was uneventful as Izuku found out that UA still had regular high school classes. Being the best hero high school, the classes were fairly difficult, meaning he needed to take a lot of notes and pay more attention if he wanted to pass. But the most interesting thing about the classes was that the teachers consisted of pro heroes. He decided to study them while the classes were ongoing. The next day at UA. The day was rather dull for Izuku. Regular classes were held almost the entire day. At noon, everyone gathered at the mess hall to feast on great cuisine made by a pro hero named Lunch Rush, a hero that used his influence to feed the less fortunate. To no one's surprise, Izuku nerded out and actually held the line for a bit. Luckily, he snapped out of it and hastily asked for an autograph from the hero. Said hero was shocked, but happy to know that there are people that appreciate him. All the while his class could only snicker, making him blush. The students of 1A all sat down in their classroom, while waiting for their teacher to show up. They then began discussing who could possibly be their teacher. Izuku then smiled when he felt a familiar presence making his way to the door. "I am," a certain hero called, making the whole class excited. Coming through the door, like a normal person, All Might yelled as he burst through the door, proudly laughing in a heroic pose. Izuku laughed at that. Nice entrance, he thought as he watched All Might make his way to the teacher's desk. He also noticed that he was wearing his Silver Age costume. His classmates were ecstatic to have All Might as their teacher. Foundation of Hero Studies. For this class, we'll be building up your hero foundation through various tests, All Might said while flexing. Starting with this. He then held out a card in a heroic way. A battle trial. Bakugo formed a vicious grin on his face. "Battle," he said excitedly. Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Trial," he said calmly. "And to go with your first battle," All Might said as he pressed a button on a remote. In an instant, several shelves on the wall opened. "We've had your costumes prepared to your specifications," he said, making everyone excited. "Now go get changed and head over to Ground B," All Might said as everyone began grabbing their gear. "And remember, from here on out, you're all heroes," he stated proudly, making everyone smile. Everyone in class quickly made their way to the locker rooms to change, with excitement running through their veins. At the Ground B training grounds, Izuku was the last to enter Ground B. Upon arrival, he instantly gained some confused looks from his classmates. Izuku was wearing a white t-shirt topped with a green hooded jacket, with the hood having a fur trim on it. On his face was a surgical mask with a skeleton grin on it. His hands also had gloves with a pattern of a skeleton on it. He also wore baggy black pants with white stripes on its sides. For footwear, he had his red combat boots on, and to top it all off, he had a red scarf around his neck. The scarf itself could reach up to his knees. The design itself was designed to be not so noticeable. When he submitted it to the support course, they had to confirm it multiple times if this was the costume that Izuku wanted. The confusion he caused made Izuku happy knowing that his idea was effective. The material used to make this outfit were specially made by the support course, making it more durable than what it appeared to be. It also helped that they didn't weigh much, giving Izuku more than enough mobility. They also had their own functions that could prove to be useful in specific situations. As for the scarf, well, scarves are cool. Deku? Ochako asked. Removing his hood and the surgical mask, he gave a friendly smile. Yep, it's me. Wow, your costume is so cool, she said in an excited voice. My suit came in rather tight, she said in an embarrassed tone. Upon analysis, Izuku noticed that her outfit seems to be themed for space. She also wore a visor on that matched the whole theme. And upon closer inspection, Izuku noticed her boots had springs on them. All in all, it was very space-like, and it suited her quirk well. Izuku shook his head. I think it looks good on you. I'd say your outfit is eye-catching and memorable. It's pretty aesthetically pleasing in my opinion anyway, he stated honestly. Ochako beamed. Thanks. That really means a lot, Deku, she said in a bubbly tone. Plus I like the boots, he added while looking at her shoes. From what I can see, they have springs on them, allowing you to reach greater heights when you use your quirk. He looked at her in the eye. It's pretty ingenious when you think about it, he finished with a smile. Ochako grinned and proceeded to give a friendly hug. Stop, you're making me blush, she said with a laugh. Izuku returned the hug, laughing as well. Heh. Easy there, he paused as a grin formed on his face. With an outfit like that, you might send me to space, he joked, making both of them laugh. Off to the side, students who saw this couldn't help but smile at the friendship displayed. Ida was especially happy to see this strong bond. Bakugo was just being Bakugo as he scoffed and focused on adjusting his grenade gauntlets. On the other side, some students were getting the completely wrong idea, including a certain pink-haired teen who formed a mischievous smile on her face, while Mineta and a teen named Kaminari were grumbling with jealousy. Lucky bastard, they both thought. All Might then arrived. I'm liking everyone's styles, he said while giving everyone a thumbs up. All Might. Regarding the performance ground we'll be using, is it the mock city from the entrance exam? Ida asked while raising his hand. All Might explained that everyone would be performing mock battles in a form of heroes versus villains with pairs on both sides. This of course made students ask a flurry of questions. So how do we determine who wins or loses? Is there a threat of expulsion? What would be the best way to group us? All Might started to sweat from the questions being thrown at him. I can't answer if you speak all at once, he said before bringing out a small piece of paper. Notes. Izuku thought as he snorted into his hand, trying to hold in his laughter. He ended up shaking from holding it in. Luckily Ochako noticed and nudged him to stop, though she was also holding in her laughter too. The scenario will be villains have a doomsday device they plan on using, and it was the hero's job to stop them. If the heroes reach the device before the time runs out or they capture the villains, they win. If the villains hold out until the time runs out or they capture the heroes, they win, All Might explained. As for the teams, he continued as he brought out a box. They will be chosen by lottery, the hero said. Is that really how we'll do it? Ida said in shock. It makes sense actually, Izuku said, grabbing everyone's attention. Pros are often forced to work with people they're unfamiliar with for short team-ups. This is probably to test us for future quick team-ups and to see if we can adapt, Izuku finished. I see, Ida shouted before turning to All Might. I apologize, he said while bowing in a perfect 90-degree angle, making Izuku and Ochako chuckle. With a thumbs up, All Might said, It fine? Now let's get started. As everyone else got their teams, Izuku was the last one to put his hand in the box before he pulled out a name. Mina Ishido? Izuku called out while looking around. That's me, came a cheerful voice. As soon as he heard the voice, he can feel his face burning up. Turning around, he desperately tried to hide the blush on his face. Not only was she beautiful up close, but her outfit made it hard to look at her. She was wearing a skin-tight suit that hugged her body. The material was a very loud blue and purple camo design that started at her chest and went all the way down her legs. She was also wearing a pair of brown and beige boots. She wore a beige vest, and to top it all off she wore a white domino mask. Izuku then realized that he was more or less gawking at her and quickly rebooted. He needed to say something, anything really. Maybe talk about quirks that could work. The weather, or even make a joke. "You'll look great." Izuku then looked away and pulled his hood down to hide his face. He could have sworn that he heard Ochako chuckling. For some reason, his brain and mouth decided to not work today. Izuku groaned internally. Great, she probably thinks that I'm a creep or something. He was about to apologize until he heard her response. Thanks. This surprised Izuku, not expecting a positive response. He then dared to peek, and to his shock, she was smiling at him. He then removed his hood, revealing his green hair and face mask. "You look great too," she said happily, making his face explode in red. Izuku gave her a shaky smile before he turned his head slightly to see Ochako giving him subtle thumbs up. A gesture he shakily but subtly returned. He then cleared his throat and shakily extended his hand. "It'll be nice working with you," he said, getting a smile out of her as she shook his hand, making him blush more. Soon the other teams were chosen, and there was 10 in total. And the first 2 pairs to do the exercise will be the following. All Might said as he pulled out 2 balls from the hero and villain boxes. Pair D will be heroes. Pair E will be villains. That caught both Izuku and Bakugo's attention. The two then looked to each other. Bakugo's face had a feral grin that just begged for blood. Izuku returned his expression with a grin that made him smirk. Izuku then glanced at Bakugo's partner, surprised to see that it was Ida. He gave the engine quirk user a smile, a gesture he returned. All Might explained that villains would be the first in the building, and would have 5 minutes to prepare everything. The battle would have a duration of 15 minutes. Everyone else will be watching from the observation room via surveillance cameras, though only All Might could hear what's going on, much to the dismay of the other students. As a precaution, if the fight ends up getting out of hand, he will personally put a stop to it. The heroes would be given a layout of the building the villains were using. Both teams would also possess capture tape. If either the heroes or villains are wrapped up by the tape, they will be out of the battle. They will also be given 2-way communicators that could be put in their ears so that they could talk from a distance. But before everything started, All Might's phone ringed, making him and everyone else stop in their tracks. He then picked it up to read the message. He then turned to his students. "My apologies, it appears there's something I need to take care of. While I'm away, you can use this opportunity to plan and bond with your teammate," he said before he ran laughing to whatever he needed to take care of. Planning, huh? Izuku thought as he put a hand on his chin. This could be a great chance to think of ways to counter Bakugo and Ida's advances. With his ability, he could hold either of them down to capture them. But knowing Bakugo, it's easier said than done. But there's also Ishido's quirk. If her quirk could be utilized well, then victory will be Midoriya? Mina tapped him on the shoulder, bringing him out of his usual muttering. "Oh." Izuku snapped out with a blush on his face. Sorry, it's a habit of mine." "Oh, it's fine, dude, guess we can plan," she said while looking at the other teams. She then turned to him with a mischievous smile that made him nervous. "Or," she purred as she stepped closer, making his heart rate spike. "We could talk about relationships," she said with a grin. "Or we could do that," he thought with a blush, noticing that she was within his personal space. Deciding that this would be a good chance to know her better, he gave her a shaky nod. Thankfully, she stepped back, giving him room to breathe. He would have fainted otherwise. Mina beamed while mentally noting Izuku's blush. She decided to have fun with his weakness when she can. For some reason, Izuku felt a chill up his spine. Mina's grin grew wider as she said, "So, you and Ochako, huh?" she said in a sing-song voice. Izuku broke out of his nervousness to give a confused look. "What do you mean?" he said, confusing her. Without missing a beat, she replied, "Well, duh. Aren't you two dating or something?" she said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Izuku then processed her words and replayed every interaction he had with Ochako. They laughed together, she calls him by his nickname, and they even hugged not too long ago. At first glance it did seem like they were a thing. But that would be far from the truth. What they had was a genuine friendship that grew stronger by the day. And nothing more beyond that. Upon processing this, Izuku then laughed, shocking Mina. After recovering the best he could, he said, No, we aren't like that. We're just really good friends," he said between breaths. This caught Mina off guard and made her eyes widen upon hearing this. "Seriously," she said, not exactly believing what she was hearing. Thanks to the laughter, Izuku relaxed and was able to properly reply. With a nod, he said, "Well, yeah. I mean, sure, she's cute and fun to be around with, but I honestly don't see her that way," he stated honestly. What they didn't notice was Ochako eavesdropping on their conversation with a smile. She felt touched that her friend said all those nice things about her, and she was glad that he was fine with being just good friends. "I'm really glad we met, Deku," she thought with a happy expression. She then grimaced as she turned to her partner, who was Yuga Aoyama. The sparkly teen was currently posing in front of a mirror trying to shine brightly according to him. Mina Ashido was stunned. She always took pride in reading other people, especially when it came to romantic matters. Since she was young, she could tell if someone has an interest in another. Her childhood friend Kurashima can attest to this. Snapping out of her shock, she asked, "So, you don't have anyone you're interested in?" she said in a sad tone, thinking that she just made her teammate uncomfortable for assuming things. With this, all of Izuku's confidence effectively disappeared. Actually, there is someone I'm interested in," he said while looking away. She perked up at his reaction and returned to her energetic self. "Oh," she said with a Cheshire grin as she leaned in and asked, "Mind telling me who it is?" "Oh, if only you knew," Izuku thought as he chuckled internally at the irony of the situation. Your crush asking you who your crush is. The universe sure had fun making things interesting for him. Looking into her eyes, he struggled to come up with an answer. Once he noticed how close she was, his brain promptly exploded. Izuku proceeded to stammer incoherent words while looking like a tomato. He pulled his hoodie down as he turned around, muttering stuff to himself. He was pretty sure he could feel steam coming out of his ears. All the while Ashido was enjoying every second of it. She was happy to know that her people reading skills weren't lost. Plus, getting a reaction like this was a nice bonus too. Thankfully, All Might arrived, indirectly rescuing Izuku from his mental breakdown and gaining everyone's attention. "I am here," he said aloud as he flexed. "Sorry about that, there was some paperwork that needed sorting." With that, he turned around and pointed towards the building. "Now then, heroes and villains, get in your positions." And with that, everyone started making their way to the building. Inside the simulation building. "Okay, first things first," Midoriya said with a serious expression as he turned to look at Ashido. "I think we should explain our skills and abilities a bit to get a better understanding of each other." Ashido nodded dumbly, hardly believing that this was the same boy she made stammer a few moments ago. "I make acid," she started. "I can secrete it from anywhere with sweat glands, but it's easiest through my hands and feet. I can control how strong it is, and I can also control its consistency." She then lifted her foot to show him the holes underneath them. My shoes are designed to make sliding around easier, she finished. Wow, Izuku said, gaining her attention. That's amazing, he said excitedly, making her blush bit, surprised by the sudden praise. It's nothing special, she stuttered a bit, mentally berating herself for showing sudden weakness. Izuku smiled as he began explaining his quirk the best he could. My quirk is called Energized Bones. This allows me to not only give me enhanced strength, but stronger bones as well, he said as he charged one for all through his body, making green electricity come out of his body, causing his emerald eyes to glow. Mina couldn't help but stare in awe at the energy coming off of Izuku. She also found herself looking at his emerald eyes in particular. Not only that, the way his energy complemented his serious expression made him look quite handsome in her eyes. Realizing that she was more or less staring longer than she should have, she quickly looked away with slight lilac on her cheeks. With a blush of his own from the staring, he continued. I can make weapons and levitate objects, he then demonstrated by summoning a bone club and make it float around. But, he added while cancelling his power and despawning the bone club. If I overuse it, I'll end up getting really tired or end up hurting myself, he finished with a bit sheepishness in his voice. Mina raised her hand like she was in a classroom. Deciding to play along, Izuku pointed to her. Yes, Miss Ishido, he said while chuckling. Mina laughed, glad to see he had a sense of humor. I heard Ochako mention cannons before. What was that all about? She asked in wonder and excitement. Oh, that? Well, I'm sure you'll see it later. I mean, we're wasting time as it is, Izuku finished with an apologetic smile as she pouted. Even if I said please? Mina said while doing her best impression of a sad puppy. After internally dying, Izuku replied. Nope, sorry, but I think we should focus on the situation. He looked at the bomb and thought while Mina slumped but agreed to be patient. Izuku turned to Ishido with a big grin, gaining her attention. Right now we're about to face two of my friends. But the real threat is Bakugo, and from knowing him most of my life, I can say that he is very dangerous, he casually stated, shocking Ishido. Shit, Ishido grimaced as she looked at Izuku with a curious expression. Why are you smiling then? Izuku's grin grew wider. Because I have a solid plan. You do? Ishido couldn't help but ask in shock, wondering how he made one so fast. Izuku then looked over to the window as he explained. Bakugo will want to use this opportunity to prove he's stronger than me. He then turned to Mina. He'll probably want to settle things on a one-on-one fight with me, leaving Ida to work on his own devices. Really? Mina asked. So what should we do? Izuku then made a wicked grin that caught Ishido off guard. Here's what we're going to do, he said as he began explaining his plan while putting his hood and mask on. At the same time, outside the same building. So what's the plan? Ida asked while he stretched his legs. Bakugo turned to him with an annoyed expression. The hell are you asking me for? He said with his usual scowl. Ida expected this and couldn't help but sigh. You knew him the longest, surely you have some sort of plan, he said with his usual gestures. Bakugo turned to him looking more annoyed than usual. I didn't even know he had a quirk in the first place, he said, shocking the teen. Not waiting for a response, he continued. I only learned about his quirk when he saved me from the sludge fuck. He spat with venom in his voice, remembering being captured by the villain. Looking down, Ida looked hopeless. So we don't have a plan to win, he said before looking at the building with a grimace. Actually I do, Bakugo said, gaining Ida's attention. I'll kick his ass and you go for the bomb. Your speed should good enough to catch Raccoon Eyes off guard, he said with a grin. Raccoon Eyes, Ida thought with a sweat drop at the nickname Bakugo gave for Ishido. He then looked at Bakugo with a determined expression. Well, it's better than nothing, I suppose, he said, making Bakugo grunt in agreement. In the observation room. After 5 minutes, All Might gave the go-ahead, and the two teams started to moor. All Might, along with the UA students, were all watching the fight in an observation room. The pro hero had a clipboard and pen in his hand as he turned the monitors on. When the screen came to life, All Might immediately noticed the villain room's floor covered by something. And from what he can tell, it wasn't the only place affected by this. Midoriya, my boy, I don't know what you planned, but know that you are just another student to me. So don't expect any favoritism here. The students also noticed the change but didn't comment on it, thinking that it was set up that way on purpose. Look, something's happening. The earphone jack girl pointed out on a specific screen, causing everyone to do the same. Back inside the building, the entrance was destroyed by an explosion, and with that, Bakugo stepped in, followed by Ida with a disapproving look. There are more subtle ways to approach this, Ida said as he kept pace with the explosive teen. Without stopping, Bakugo replied. They know we're here anyway, he stated, making Ida shake his head. Bakugo and Ida walked down the hallway, they kept their eyes peeled for anything. As the two turned the corner, they were greeted by Izuku at the end of the hallway with his hands in his pockets. Despite having a surgical mask on, Bakugo knew he was grinning. Heya, Izuku greeted casually, making Bakugo narrow his eyes but confusing Ida. Did you miss me? He joked, making the blonde teen growl. For eyes, go for the bomb, I'll take care of Deku, Bakugo said as he cracked his knuckles with a grin. Ida was shocked by the sudden order and said, Where would I even go? He finished while switching to a fighting stance. Without looking away from Izuku, Bakugo answered, Fucker probably placed it on the last floor. Though reluctant, Ida ran past Izuku, who gave him a smile as he did. All according to plan, Izuku thought as his grin widened when he saw Ida make his way towards the stairs. He then turned to Bakugo, who lunged at him with an explosion ready. Izuku saw this a mile away and simply dodged it by stepping to the side. He watched as Bakugo landed and turned to look at him with a world-ending glare. Damn it, Deku, don't dodge me. Bakugo growled as he went into his fighting stance. With his hands still in his pocket, Izuku just shrugged. What? Did you think I'll just stand there and take it? Bakugo pulled his right arm back with a bigger grin on his face. One hit is all I need, Deku, you can't dodge forever. We'll see about that, Izuku said with glowing eyes as he began chuckling. Bakugo then charged at Izuku again with a mighty roar. Meanwhile, at the stairs, Tenya Ida was struggling. It's bad enough that he had a teammate that more or less won't cooperate with him, but they also had to face against a friend with a strange quirk. And to make things worse, neither of them knew much about his quirk either. They also knew that Izuku's teammate also had a dangerous quirk as well. And it didn't help that Izuku was also great at analysis and good at formulating strategies. Oh well, at least it couldn't get worse from here. Right? Boy, was he wrong. What was supposed to be a simple climb turned into a slow but dangerous one. In front of Ida was a set of stairs covered in some sort of slime, making it difficult to simply rush up the steps. As soon as he took his first step, he grimaced from the lack of balance on it. There's no time to look for another way, he thought as he glanced around. With no other choice, he made his way up the slippery steps, encountering some close calls along the way. Looking up, he paled when he saw that more staircases are covered with slime. There was also no sign of Izuku's teammate, making him nervous as he climbed. The thought of Ishido just waiting at the top to push him down the steps terrified him. With all these obstacles, only one thought crossed his mind. Midoriya, why? He thought as he let out a frustrated sigh before he continued the climb. Back at the hallway, Izuku didn't know why, but he suddenly felt his sins crawl on his back. But he shrugged it off as looked at Bakugo, who was panting from his assault earlier. But other than slight fatigue, he didn't have any damage on him. Izuku, on the other hand, was lightly panting with a bit of sweat on his forehead. Some parts of his outfit also had a few burn marks indicating Bakugo got a lucky hit or two. Thinking that this had gone long enough, Izuku decided to make his move. My turn, he said as he stomped his right foot forward, sending a wave of bones towards Bakugo, who was surprised by the sudden movement. Though shocked, he propelled himself in the air, avoiding the wave. While in the air, Bakugo put his arms behind his back as he used his quirk to launch himself towards Izuku. But before he could reach him, he was suddenly covered in a green glow as he was stopped mid-air. Looking up, he saw Izuku with a hand stretched out. Izuku then pushed Bakugo to the other side of the room. The latter slammed into the wall, knocking the wind out of him before falling face first on the floor. After taking a few breaths, Izuku took a few steps forward to see if he knocked him out, only to see him stir, making him stop in his tracks. The blonde let out a growl as he stood to his feet. "Now I'm pissed," Bakugo roared. "Good," Izuku thought with a grin as both of his hands were out of his pockets. "Die," Bakugo roared as he blasted towards Izuku again. Izuku sent a bone towards Bakugo, who used his quirk to dodge it. Once he was close enough, Bakugo sent a kick to Izuku. The green-haired teen reacted by ducking under the kick. He then charged a bit of one for all and punched Bakugo in the stomach, launching him to the other side of the room, slamming him into the wall again. Bakugo quickly stood up and rushed towards Izuku again, the latter shocked from the quick recovery. With a wave of his hand, Izuku sent more bones towards the explosive teen. Instead of dodging, Bakugo brought his hands together and sent an explosion, dispersing the bones. Boom. "You're mine?" Bakugo roared as he rushed through the smoke, driving his fist towards Izuku. The fist made contact with his stomach, causing him to gasp from the hit. Keeping up the rhythm, Bakugo planted his palms on Izuku's chest as he sent a small explosion, propelling the teen. Now it was Izuku's turn to be sent flying, but quickly recovered as he used his psychokinesis on himself to stop him from slamming into the wall. He then faced Bakugo, who was once again charging towards him. "It'll take more than that to beat me, you fucker," Bakugo roared with a bloody grin as he launched towards Izuku. "If it were that easy, then it wouldn't be fun," Izuku replied with a smile as he sprouted a bone beneath Bakugo, who hasn't noticed it yet. When he did, though, it was too late. The bone shot up and slammed onto his stomach, sending him the air. While in the air, Bakugo recovered and propelled himself towards Izuku. "You're below me," he roared in fury, ignoring the pain from the earlier hits on him. Izuku then made a bone staff and threw it towards Bakugo, who propelled himself to the side to dodge it. After fixing his trajectory, he looked forward again, only to find Izuku to be nowhere in sight. "Actually, I'm right behind you," Bakugo's eyes widened. Turning his head, he was immediately greeted by a powered-up punch to the face, sending him the ground. Izuku then landed a good distance away from Bakugo as he powered down and let his stamina recover a bit. Bakugo then staggered to his feet as his hands started to make small explosions. Suddenly he smiled as he slowly moved his right arm. "It's ready," he said with an almost mad grin as he stared at Izuku. He then aimed his arm towards the teen as he let out a chuckle, which was unnerving even if they were friends. Izuku's eyes glowed as he went into his fighting stance again, knowing his friend would sometimes be reckless with his moves. "My explosions are sparked by the sweat in my palms, which is like nitroglycerin," Bakugo explained as he pulled the stock of his gauntlet. Izuku raised an eyebrow at this. He already knew this, so why was he explaining this? He then thought about it as he looked at the gauntlets thoughtfully before his eyes suddenly widened in realization. He then discreetly summoned a bone above Bakugo. Now would be a good time to execute the plan, Izuku thought as he saw Bakugo at the perfect position, which was next to an open door in the hallway. His lack of response didn't deter Bakugo at all as he grabbed the pin on the right gauntlet. "Now if the specs are as I asked, then I can store my sweat into this and dash." Bakugo never got to finish his sentence as Izuku sent the bone down on him. The bone smashed into the gauntlet's pin, destroying it and stunning Bakugo as well. The latter grunting in pain from the hit, glaring at the damaged equipment, before directing his furious gaze at Izuku. "What the foo dash? Ashido, now." Hearing her name, the pink teen came from the room beside Bakugo and sent a batch of non-lethal acid at Bakugo's eyes, making him scream. Fuck. It burns. Bakugo screamed as he used his good hand to try and nurse his burning eyes. Ashido then regrouped with Izuku, who was preparing for the final move. A few minutes earlier. Here's what we're going to do, Izuku said as he looked into her eyes. I need you to use your quirk to cover this room and the set of stairs with slime, he said as he gestured the room and pointed to the stairs, which confused Ashido. Why would I do that? She asked, not really seeing where this was going. Because my friend Ida uses a speed quirk, with the room and stairs covered in slime, he wouldn't be able to utilize his quirk well, or maybe not at all, he said with a grin. Connecting the dots, Ashido then mirrored Izuku's expression and said, "Wow, that's pretty evil," she stated in a sly tone that made Izuku look sheepish. "It's not like I mean to be evil," he stammered with a blush, making her giggle. She waved a hand. "Relax, dude, I know you don't mean it. Besides, we're on the villain side, remember?" she said in an understanding tone. This seemed to calm Izuku as he continued. "Right, with Ida taken care of, that leaves Bakugo," he stated seriously. "I'll take him on." Izuku started, making her look at him confused. "Now while I'm fighting him, you'll be hidden at one of the rooms in the hallway. When I give the signal, you'll jump out and spray him with non-lethal acid at his eyes." Izuku then brought out his tape. "Once he's incapacitated, I'll deal the final blow and he'll be out of the game." Ashido nodded. "But what if he leaves the area? Or how can I even know the signal?" Izuku waved his hand. "Don't worry, Bakugo relies on close-range combat mostly, so keeping him close won't be a problem. As for the signal, don't worry, I'll only call you when I know you have an opening. But beyond that, I need you to trust me." Ashido pumped her arms up with a smile. "It's the best plan we have so far. So I'll follow your lead, boss," she finished with a mock salute. Izuku laughed at this before gesturing the room. "Then let's get started, time's almost up," he said as they started to move, both with grins on their faces. Present time. Everything moved in slow motion as Izuku's plan came into play. Bakugo could hear another set of footsteps making its way to Izuku. With that, he came to one conclusion. "It's a fucking trap," Bakugo thought as he started to recover from the burning sensation in his eyes. Seeing this, Izuku covered Bakugo in a green glow as he lifted him up, shocking the temporarily blind teen. Before pulling him towards himself as he charged one for all and reared his fist back. "Take this," Izuku shouted as he hit Bakugo with a left hook across his face. The blonde let out a painful grunt as he felt the pain not only from the punch, but the attacks that Izuku did earlier. Shit. Bakugo thought as he tried to set off an explosion, only for his body to give out from pain and exhaustion. "Get dumped on, buddy," Izuku said with an exhausted smile as he allowed Bakugo to fall. Once the explosive teen fell, Izuku proceeded to lift him off the ground with his powers. He and Ashido then proceeded to tie him up with the capture tape. "Bakugo has been captured," All Might called out from their communicators. With a sigh, Izuku then gently lowered the unconscious teen to the ground. He then turned to Ashido with a smile. "Awesome. Now, let's head to the doomsday device." Ashido nodded but quickly made a face of concern. "Dude, your face got burned." Izuku then touched his cheek, only to wince as his cheek stung a bit. He then noticed that his surgical mask was long gone and destroyed. "Must have happened a while ago, don't worry. It doesn't hurt that bad, so let's get going. We need to make sure the weapon is secure." Ashido looked like she wanted to argue, but she simply nodded, following Izuku as he led the way to the other set of stairs that have no slime on it. "What do we do about Ida though?" she asked as they ran. "Already have a plan," he said without looking back, but Ashido could tell he was grinning. She wanted to say more, but from what she can tell from spending a short time with him, she can tell that he was an incredibly kind and honest person, who didn't look like the type to be doubted. She also loved getting a reaction out of him. It was honestly cute in her eyes. Realizing where her thoughts were going, she felt her face heat up a bit. Thankfully, Izuku was too busy climbing the steps to notice. She shook her thoughts out of her head and focused on the mission at hand. She wasn't sure what those thoughts meant, but one thing's for sure, she had a lot to think about when the game is over. Inside the observation room, All Might had a bigger smile on his face than before. At first, he thought that Izuku would use his skills to show Bakugo that he was stronger. Instead, his mind was in the game, and not on proving anything. He was also glad he stopped Bakugo from using his gauntlet. The damage caused could have been catastrophic to both sides. All Might then looked at another screen and couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for Bakugo's partner, who just finished climbing the stairs. In the meantime, Izuku's classmates were having their own discussion. "Man, his quirk sure is something, isn't it?" said Kirishima, making most of his classmates agree. Yayarosa then voiced her thoughts. "It is quite the unusual kind, it really makes you wonder what else he is capable of," she stated with a thoughtful expression, making them all think. "Well, one thing's for sure, I'm glad he's on our side," Kaminari said, making them shudder at the thought of Izuku being a villain. They then continued to watch the match. Bomb room. Ida had just finished what he would describe as the most inconvenient climb he has ever experienced so far. Upon entering the room, Ida paled at the sight before him. At the center was the Doomsday device, but that wasn't the only thing. The floors were covered with the same slimy substance, making it difficult to use his quirk. But not impossible to use. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw Izuku and Ishido calmly making their way to the device. "Heya," Izuku said as he stood in front of the bomb, putting himself between Ida and the bomb. While Ishido stood to the side of the room, staying alert in case of any sudden movement from Ida. "First of," Izuku said in a regretful tone that caught both students off guard. "Sorry about that whole stairs thing, I never meant to make you angry or anything," he finished. "Yep, definitely an incredibly kind person," Ishido thought as a small smile formed on her face. "I know," Ida thought with a smile at Izuku's kindness. But then a serious expression on his face, making his opponents tense up a bit. "I don't need your apologies, villain," Ida said while doing his fighting stance. "Though my companion is beaten, know that I will never surrender," he shouted with clenched fists and a dramatic pose. "So serious." Both students thought with a sweat drop at their classmates' over-the-top acting. Deciding to have some fun, a smirk formed on Izuku's face. "I admire your spirit, if that's the case I better not disappoint," he said as he took his left hand out his pockets and snapped his fingers. When nothing appeared to happen, both Ida and Ishido were confused by this. Ida was about to speak up, until Izuku casually pointed upwards with his index finger, wearing a big grin on his face. Following the direction of his finger, both students looked up, only to feel their blood run cold. Above Izuku were two medium-sized gaster blasters looking ready to unleash hell. While behind the teen were floating bones. But that was the least of Ida's worries. "So those are the cannons," Ishido thought with a gulp as she stared at the cannons as they lowered themselves and took their positions on both of Izuku's sides. "So, hero," Izuku started as both cannons began charging up with low growls. "Are you ready for my special attack?" he finished with an evil grin. This made both teens tense up, but for different reasons. For Ishido, she knew Izuku wouldn't severely hurt his friend, but she heard rumors about Izuku's firepower, so she thought about taking cover somewhere. As for Ida, he saw what those cannons can do firsthand. The thought of him going against that much firepower terrified him. Even if he had his speed quirk, the slime that covered the room made it impossible to run at full speed. But still, in this situation, a hero must never give in, despite the massive odds stacked against him. So his response was clear. "Come at me, villain," Ida shouted, shocking Ishido, but making Izuku smile with respect. Izuku then shrugged. "All right. he said as his eyes glowed, making both teens sweat. Here goes nothing, he finished, making both teens brace for whatever is coming. The villain team wins. All Might called over the comms, startling Ishido and Ida. Meanwhile, Izuku made all his weapons disappear and chuckled upon seeing Ida's confused face. "Ha," was the only thing Ida could say, as Ishido also looked to Izuku for an explanation. "That's right, it's literally nothing," Izuku snickered. "You get it?" He began laughing at their dumbstruck expressions. After registering what he said, both of their eyes widened, though Ida and Ishido had different reactions. As for the observation room, everyone there did the famous face vault at Izuku's joke. Ida, with a dumbfounded expression, looked at Izuku. "Not only did you make a perfect plan, but you used your knowledge on your enemy's quirk and used it to your advantage. Rest assured, I'll take this as a learning experience, and I don't plan on losing to you next time," he finished while giving a friendly smile as he offered a handshake to Izuku. "Glad to see that there aren't any hard feelings, buddy," he said with a smile as he shook his hand, making the other teen nod. As for Mina, she's been spending this whole time laughing at the silliness of the situation. Before anything could be said, a slight tremble was felt throughout the building. "God damn it. DEKU." Ida and Izuku's sweat dropped before the latter turned to Ida. "I think Bakugo woke up," he said casually, causing Ishido to double down in laughter. Back with the class. Needless to say, Izuku was deemed to be the MVP of the game. They did it because he was the one to come up with a solid plan to counter Bakugo and Ida. And if all the praise was appreciated, he made sure to give Ishido credit as well. A gesture that got her to give him the most beautiful smile he's ever seen. Well, in his opinion anyway. Bakugo remained silent, but Izuku knew it was just him reflecting on his actions, and that there wasn't any bad blood between them. Izuku was more than glad that Bakugo wasn't as childish as others may suspect. While watching the other battles, he observed everyone's quirk. One that caught his attention was Todoroki Shoto. He watched as the stoic teen covered an entire building in ice with no signs of looking tired. One thing's for sure, he needed to keep an eye on him. His thoughts drifted to Mina, as she sat on the other side of the room talking to her friends. His experience while being with her was refreshing, even though it was for a short while. She was fun to be around with and very understanding. She may reduce him to a stammering mess, but in all honesty, he didn't mind one bit. He wanted to spend more time with her, but he didn't know the best way to do it. But then again, if I don't find out the answer, then I never will, he thought with a somber look. Sure, being rejected will hurt, but living the rest of your life without knowing will hurt even more. On the bright side, even if it doesn't work out, the best outcome would be becoming friends at least. With that in mind, Izuku decided to make his move when classes are dismissed. But not without talking to a friend. After classes, Mina Ishido was in deep thought. The young teen was currently by herself as she made her way home. Unsurprisingly, her thoughts were centered around our green hero. At first she found her classmate to be underwhelming. But after spending time with him for a short bit, it was clear that her initial impression, and the impressions of others, were terribly flawed. Just by talking to him it was clear he was not only smart, but he also had a brave side to him. He was kind and he also appeared to have a strong drive to be a hero. All in all, she wanted to get to know him more when she got the chance. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard a shy voice. Hey, Ishido." Turning around, she was greeted by none other than Izuku Midoriya, who had a red face as he looked at his feet. Speak of the devil, Mina thought with a mental chuckle. She was about to ask what he wanted until Izuku spoke up. Sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask you something," he asked in a low voice, but she heard it. Sure dude, what's up?" she asked, fully turned around. She wanted to talk to him, now it was her chance. Though very red-faced, Izuku looked at Ishido with a determined expression. He then opened his mouth to say something. To be